So as I'm sure a lot of you know, Joel Embiid is signed with Skechers, and he's recently been seen wearing the Skechers SKX Float. And my big question is, are these really the best shoe for him right now, especially coming from where he came from with Under Armour? And, you know, in trying to find that out, I really keep coming back to the same adage I say in so many of my videos. It's not the uppers that produce the stability of the shoe, whether it be medial or lateral stability for ankle sprainers. It's the midsole and the shape of the outsole. And I think that this shoe is probably the best representation of that I could just possibly think of. And in other ways, it almost proves the point too well. So let's get into it. So starting off, the Float does come in a low and a mid to high. I'm considering these a low just because, you know, how they feel. Now, number one, the uppers on these for where they contact your foot are some of the bulkiest and most padded uppers I've seen. They're also incredibly comfortable. The tongue is so super padded, and not that it's just padded, but the padding is dense, right? So you really feel insulated within the shoe, which is outstanding. The laces, you really do not feel them at all when they come down over your foot. It feels just like a bear hug around you. It's awesome. Now the problem with that is though, is that the laces on these, for what the shoe is, because it is a heavy shoe, the laces are actually kind of puny. So to match the level of the shoe, you're probably gonna wanna augment the laces. That's the first thing. Now the next thing is like I said, the uppers are just so bulky, and there's really every single type of thread you could find in these. There is block weaving with textile and TPU. There's backing here over the lace line. These are all reinforced along it. And there's all this bunting in the ankle collar holding you in. You got some plastic pieces that come around. I mean, there really is just, I mean, an incredible amount of material in these uppers. Really, if you can think of it, Skechers put it in the uppers of these. Now, if you look at this on the breathability test, you would think that they would trap heat like you wouldn't believe. However, they only heated up 119 degrees, which, no, it's not the most breathable shoe out there, but also, it's not the Spawn Flotro, right? They did not feel hot underfoot. Yeah, no, it's not the Leaning Gamma either, where it just, you could feel the breeze coming through, but for a shoe this heavy and substantial, for it being middle of the pack in terms of heating, I actually thought that was a huge win for that. Now, I did notice afterwards, a few minutes, there were certain areas of the shoe, certain pockets of the shoe that were still holding on to heat. So certain parts, like the tongue of this shoe, honestly, the strobe board a little bit, is gonna hold on to some heat and moisture. You can augment that, which we'll talk about in the fit section, by just changing some things up. It's actually pretty easy. So it's actually a really pleasant surprise, especially if you look at the breathability mapping of this thing. Yeah, I mean, you got fog coming out of some different parts of these. Obviously not the most breathable shoe out there, but I just keep coming back to the point that it's much, much, much better than you think it's gonna be. Now the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Yeah, I mean, the burr does really work through the drag guard pretty good. It does start to kind of get into the weaving underneath of it as well. Like I said, the uppers are pretty bulky and substantial, plus you get so much outsole tread that comes up over it. So as long as you're not an extreme everter or dragger, which in these it's gonna be hard to be just because of the mid and outsole, which we'll talk about. So honestly, still on outdoor courts, I think there's enough protection and the shape of the shoe is enough that I still think they're fine. And I know right around now is when I will give a containment score on the shoe. However, I do want to wait until the mid and outsole to do that, because it is just it's the biggest crux of the shoe, and I really can't explain it until we kind of go through all those parts. And so speaking of that, if you look at the midsole on the teardown, once again, just so much going on here in the midsole, it's nuts. Number one, you've got a foam strobel, which is gonna be really, really cushy underfoot. That's gonna break down over time, especially if you are a bigger player playing in these. You're definitely gonna bottom that, so that sensation is not going to be there for the long run, but when it's new, very cushioned. Right under that, you get the Hyperburst foam, which is a supercritical EVA foam that is blown with CO2 and nitrogen. Actually saw a really interesting video on this where the head of product development was actually talking about that. It's really crazy to see how this is actually made. And then under that is a really dense and stout EVA carrier. And then sandwiched between all that is an incredibly long shank going from the junction of the mid and rear foot all the way here into the forefoot. And I gotta say, this thing's really doing the Lord's work in here. I mean, I just keep thinking to that meme from the Green Mile after someone like Embiid is probably in these shoes, because, you know, the midsole is so heavy in these that that's what creates so much of the weight of the shoe. The shank is really doing all of the work in the shoe to make this thing, you know, if there's, you know, any responsiveness in this shoe, which there is, it is the shank doing it, because that Hyperburst midsole, whereas it's supposed to be a very light, very easy flowing feeling shoe in Skechers running shoes, it's sandwiched right in all of this dense EVA, this, you know, really heavy upper type shoe, and just a really heavy package shoe as it is. Because the Hyperburst to me is in this shoe, not necessarily for its performance and its snap, but just to keep the shoe from going over 20 ounces for a men's size 11, right? It's just meant to keep the shoe from not really feeling like a brick. I mean, if you look at it on the bounce height test, you know, 30 centimeters in the rear foot, 28 in the forefoot, you know, this thing isn't breaking any records in terms of bounce height. Some of that's because of the foam strobel, but a lot of it's just because the shoe in general, like I said, it's just more of a dense shoe. Now, speaking of, when you put this shoe on, you are gonna, we'll talk about this in the fit section too, but when you put it on, you're gonna feel a lot of arch contour. That's because of the insole, right? It looks like a polyurethane insole here. I might be wrong, but it looks like poly, I could just cut it open here. But these polyurethane insoles, or like I said, just the regular Skechers insoles, a lot of times, actually, yeah, it's pretty plasticky looking under there, so I'm gonna go with it. If not, then you can call me out in the comment section. But you know, these Skechers midsoles, they really do feel arch contouring when you first get them on. I noticed with me, just in the time I play tested this shoe though, this start to wear down. The good part is that honestly the shoe is better off without this insole, which we'll talk about in the fit section, but just suffice to say, it is gonna be a different sensation if you have this in versus like a stock insole versus an orthotic. All right, so this is my new tread viewing box, and it's a way for me to see the tread of the shoe from underneath with a slow motion camera. And on the SKX Float, which is interesting about these when I put them on, you can really see how resilient the rubber is and just what this pattern is doing. It's basically giant radial patterns, right? They're very thin lines of tread going into these circular patterns with some, you know, linear breaks here and there. But you can see the resiliency of it when it hits the polycarbonate. That tread does start to bend and flow, and then at a certain point, it stops. And then at that point, the shoe stops. Plus, with the shape of it having this huge flange that the outsole and midsole create, I mean, it's a really long and just broad flange on these things. It really is no surprise that on the grip test ramp, that thing didn't slip until 43 degrees. I was really expecting it, you know, to do pretty well. It's because of the compound of the rubber, how many gaps there are here, can you see it? How many gaps there are in between these lines of tread. I mean, there's some really wide gapping there for especially when you're on a flat surface, maybe not on an inclined plane, but on a flat surface. When you're kind of putting your weight down on one part of the shoe, these treads will move out of the way to a certain point, but then they will grab. And so to me, on an indoor hardwood court, doesn't matter really the type of court it is, outdoor courts, slick painted courts, these things have just such confident grip on them. Plus a durometer being so high, you wouldn't think that this rubber would move out of the way as well as it does. And that's a testament to the actual design of the treads, right? It's not the compound of the rubber, it's how it's laid out. And that's what allows it to move around so well. So honestly, kudos for whoever designed this outsole tread, because honestly, this has been some of the best outsole tread on any surface, and it performs so consistently on different surfaces that I really just had to make special mention of it. The only thing that's a little confusing about that is you look at the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, and I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a millimeter of damage on this for how, you know, high the durometer is. The thing is, like I said, the tread is thin, right? And it's shallow. So on very, very gritty outdoor courts, I could see these really breaking down. I think on slick painted courts, indoor hardwood, rubberized, carpet, I think they're fine. The thing is they're so protective and so shock absorbing on outdoor courts. I still think they're a good buy. I think if you can just stop the dragging or sliding, which like I said, they're not the best shoes for anyway, I think you can probably keep them pretty good. They're not gonna be the most durable shoes out there, but I think as long as it's not a razor sharp outdoor court, I still think these are a pretty decent buy for outdoor courts. But I think the two intersections of this shoe, right, are the speed ratio and then the containment score, right, that we talked about in the uppers of these. So the speed ratio, I'll tell you first, comes in at a 1.7, shank score of 0.2, well earned, brings that up to a 1.90. And yeah, I mean, I don't think these really deserve to get out of the ones in terms of speed. They are heavy, bottom heavy, I should say, feeling shoes. They don't necessarily feel like bricks because they're very plush. Almost like those bricks that they give you. It's like the American football was real famous for this back in the 90s, where they would give these foam bricks to people to throw at their TVs so they wouldn't throw actual things at their TVs and break them. That's what they feel like. They feel like the foam bricks. I think they were called the bad call bricks. I know in Pittsburgh, but we had them. They were called the bad call bricks. That's kind of what these feel like. And that really translates to the containment because they're so bottom heavy. They're so stable on the bottom of your foot. The mid and outsole does not move. I mean, these things, I trampled over my dad's feet 3-4 times. I mean, these things laugh at that. I mean, they're so stable on court. You can't, it's so, I mean, I'm not saying you can't. It is really hard to roll these things. I mean, I tried. The thing is the uppers are not very containing. The uppers really don't match the outsole. Yes, they're bulky and they're padded. It's not spraining potential, right? Because, like I said, the uppers stay, I mean, they don't like allow you to turn over, but to me, you would first burst through the uppers before you would sprain your ankle in these. That's kind of how I felt like these would just break. If you can get the insole out of them and get deeper into the shoe, that gets much better. If you're also not somebody prone to lateral instability or someone that really, you know, pushes hard on the outside of their foot, if you're somebody more plays duck-footed inside, then the stability is fine because actually medially is a lot better than laterally. It's just that don't expect the uppers to feel like the mid and outsole because the mid and outsole, like I said, it almost is like it's not allowing you to turn. It's not allowing you to become unstable on the court. And then your foot at the same time is trying to find the weak spot. Or it's like the velociraptor, right? Testing the fence, right? That's what your foot's doing. So like I said, we'll talk about this in the fit section, how, you know, you can get rid of this, but the deeper you can sit into the shoe, the more stable it's going to become because just, you know, the more the bulky materials you're going to have around your foot. And so of course that brings me directly into the fit of the floats. You know, they fit pretty generous in terms of width. They come in at 9.4 centimeters for a men's size 11. They only have a 6-degree in flare, so they're not bumping up against anything. That they really, you know, they do fit pretty bulky. And that's the thing. They're pretty straight. They actually aren't super long. I thought they would be longer shoes. They're not. So I mean, a narrow and medium foot, if you want, you can try to go down, as long as you're not long-footed or long-toed, you can try to go down a half size to get the weight down on these. If you're a 2E, I would probably just go true to size. In terms of the snake bitten foot, yes, they feel great when this thing is first in and it molds your foot pretty nice. Like I said, this is gonna break down. The thing is, I think the shoe fits so much better without these. So if you can get a more low profile orthotic with a deep heel cup into these, you will actually get better containment because the deeper the heel cup, the less side-to-side containment these things have to pick up for you, and it'll more mimic, you know, the mid and the outsole. Because like I said, the mid and the outsole of these, I know I've said it 1,000 times, it's the most stable setup I've ever seen. And that's, I think, with Embiid, right? I'm sure he's taken this thing out. He's got his own orthotic in there, right? He's sitting lower into this shoe. And I think that's why I mean, you saw him come down on these things, right? And tweak his knee. And I know everyone's like, oh, it's the shoe's fault. It is anything but this shoe's fault. The shock absorbing capabilities on these, right? The forgiveness of these shoes is unlike anything I have seen in the basketball space, save for the AG4, the New Balance Fresh Foam BBV2. It's just these don't have the performance characteristics really of those two shoes. But in terms of protection, if you're coming back from a knee operation, right, like he is, and you're a big, I mean, yeah, this is the best shoe for him right now, for sure, in terms of that. It'd be nice if it were a little bit lighter, but for someone as heavy as he and as tall as he is, I mean, he doesn't care about that, right? Like, he's gonna want those types of characteristics. So really anything snake bitten in your foot, I mean, these are gonna be fantastic. The only thing they're not good for is somebody with bloody toenails, prone to ingrown toenails, right? Toenail fungus, because these do have potential, right, to slam into the front of them and just to get that runner's toe. Honestly, they're pretty great for everything except for like, and like a really thin player, somebody with maybe a little bit of leg weakness there, right? But if you can move these shoes up and down, the shock absorption and just the forgiveness of them, like I said, unmatched in the basketball space, honestly, maybe even the pickleball space as well. And so really talking about the performance of it, it ties directly into the fit of these. Like I said, they're not rocket ships by any means. If anything, they make you feel more anchored to the ground, right? Getting up and down, up and down, up and down in these is not the easiest thing in the world, especially if you're trying to block shots. I mean, I need all the help I can get. The thing is though, is your feet feel pretty darn good in them if you're not trying to lift them up off the ground all the time, right? You know, if you spend a lot of time on the ground, you're not someone that's trying to get up into the air a lot, then these are really out of this world. With Embiid, it's almost the same thing, whereas he just doesn't need any assistance, right? He is fine getting up into the air, right? He's so close to the rim anyway, who cares? Right? So for someone like him, someone like, you know, like Zach LaVine, right? You know, whereas in the original Fresh Foam BB, he probably didn't care. He liked kind of the feeling underfoot. Whereas the new one, the BBV2 is great for anybody, but people like that who are already, you know, Victor Wembanyama, right, would probably like these if he liked a bulkier shoe. People that didn't need the assistance and just wanted the shock absorption, sure, this is great. And I think for Embiid, I mean, no, this is not an Embiid signature shoe, but you can tell it was built for someone like him in mind. And I think if you're somebody, maybe a little bit more snake bites on your foot, playing pickleball as well on indoor courts, absolutely fantastic. Outdoor courts, like I said, the unforgiveness of asphalt and concrete can be just awful on your joints, especially if you're going a long summer season, right? You're playing outdoors a lot. Honestly, these might not be the worst things in the world to have in your bag if you're just looking for shock absorption. No, if you're looking to leap up into the air, if you're looking to do some really fast, quick movements, maybe not the best thing. But if you're just charging to the rim, right, and you don't care how you get there and you don't need something to help you get up off the ground, then yeah, if you're just looking to protect joints, sure, I think these are fantastic. Honestly, for a first attempt at basketball, I liked them. I thought there was a lot to like. I just think that the uppers need tuned a little bit. Really, I think that's the biggest thing. And just try to get the weight down of these, right? There are a lot of different ways to bring the weight down in a shoe, and I think once Skechers maybe learn some things from this, I think they'll be able to, like I said, get that weight down, get the performance up, hopefully keeping the same shock absorbing capabilities in the shoe. Because not every shoe has to be a rocket ship. Not every shoe has to be a speed demon. There's, you know, certain shoes, certain players. That's why, like I said, there's no one best shoe. There's just the best shoe for you. And I think with these, it just really proved my point so well that it's the mid and the outsole of the shoe that creates all the stability. So love to hear your thoughts on these in the comments down below. Pretty crazy. Like I said, it was a super interesting shoe to do. I was really excited. I was really happy, like kind of what they turned out to be, because there's a lot to talk about in them. So if you do want to see one of the older siblings to the floats, which I think is kind of like the float, but with like the performance aspect on top of it, the New Balance Fresh Foam BBV2 under the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam, all the layers you can take of it. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.